Welcome back, everyone. I am absolutely pumped you're joining me. Today, in this explainer, we are diving headfirst into one of the most famous, most debated, and, honestly, most beautiful texts in human history, the first two chapters of Genesis. But listen, we are just going to skim the English translation like we usually do. No, we're going to peel back the layers and look at the original Hebrew text, because when you do that, you uncover these incredible poetic meanings and mind-blowing linguistic connections that completely get lost in translation. So get ready, because we're about to see a very familiar story in a totally new light. Here is how we're breaking it all down today. First, in the beginning. Second, the cosmic order. Third, the breath of life. Fourth, wordplay in Eden. And finally, the two creation stories. All right, let's just jump right into it. Section 1. In the beginning, the opening lines. So the very first line of Genesis in Hebrew reads like this. Bereshit bara Elohim, et hashamayim et haaretz. Now, you definitely know the English version. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? It's iconic. It's this incredibly powerful rhythmic start that just instantly establishes the ultimate authority and the massive scope of what's about to unfold. But what's really fascinating is the very next verse. It describes the state of the earth before any of the actual creating really kicks off. And the Hebrew uses this brilliant poetic phrase, tohu vavohu. It usually gets translated as formless and void. But say it out loud with me. Tohu vavohu. You can almost hear it, right? It literally sounds like an echoing, chaotic emptiness. It sets the stage perfectly, presenting this dark, watery chaos that is just crying out for some sort of cosmic order. Which brings us nicely to Section 2, the cosmic order, structuring the chaos. Genesis chapter 1 is structured with this incredibly strict, almost musical rhythm. It's highly chronological. God literally speaks things into existence from afar to bring ultimate order to that tohu vavohu chaos we just talked about. Think of it like this. Days 1 through 3 are all about creating environments, separating light from dark, sky from waters, dry land from the sea. And then, days 4 through 6 are about populating those exact environments. The sun and stars fill the light, birds and fish fill the skies and seas, and land animals and humanity fill the dry land. It's just a beautifully structured, symmetrical, macro view of the universe being put in order. And all of this brilliantly builds up to the climax of the cosmic sequence, which, funnily enough, actually spills over into the first 3 verses of chapter 2. And that climax is all about the number 7. On the 7th day, the text says the heavens and the earth were entirely completed. God blessed the 7th day and made it holy because he rested from all the work of creating. In the ancient Hebrew mind, the number 7 isn't just a number. It represents ultimate completion and perfect, absolute order. But then, right at chapter 2, verse 4, we hit a wall. There is a stark, sudden literary shift. We zoom way, way in. We go from this macro view of a highly structured, symmetrical universe in chapter 1 to a very tactile, character-driven micro view in chapter 2. It's exactly like watching a movie where the director suddenly swaps a wide-angle drone shot of the entire Earth for a macro lens focusing in on a single handful of dirt. To really grasp this shift, we have to look at the verbs. In chapter 1, God's action is described using the Hebrew word bara. This means to create, but it specifically implies creation by divine decree from a vast, vast distance. God simply speaks, let there be light, and boom, it is so. It's incredibly majestic, sure, but it's also very distant. Let's look at how that changes in section 3, the breath of life, an intimate creation. Right here in chapter 2, the text drops a completely new verb for God's creative action, yatsar. Now, this doesn't mean speaking things into existence from the cosmos. Not at all. It means to form or mold, exactly like a potter working intimately with clay. The text is suddenly depicting God getting his hands dirty in the soil of the earth to literally sculpt humanity. And you guys, the intimacy doesn't stop there. Verse 7 says, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. The Hebrew phrase there is nishmat chaim. I mean, just think about how close you have to be to someone to physically breathe into their nostrils. The distant cosmic creator of chapter 1 is suddenly performing CPR on a sculpture of mud in chapter 2, making him a living soul. It is just a breathtakingly intimate image. The text then grabs this highly intimate story and grounds it firmly in physical, tangible reality. Verses 10 through 14 literally walk us through the specific geography of a river flowing out of Eden to water the garden, which then splits into 4 headwaters. We get the Pishon flowing around Havilah, the Gahan around Cush, the Tigris running east of Assyria, and the Euphrates. We aren't floating in the cosmic ether anymore. We are planted firmly in the dirt and the water of the ancient Near East. Because this text is so deeply rooted in the physical earth, it sets up some amazing linguistic tricks. That brings us to section 4, wordplay in Eden. Etymological links. Check out this brilliant phonetic connection in verse 7. The Hebrew word for the human being is Adam, and what was he molded out of? The ground, which in Hebrew is Adamaha. Adam from the Adamaha. Humanity gets its very name from the literal dirt it was formed from. To put that into perspective for English speakers, it would be like calling the first human earthling because he came from the earth, or actually calling him Dustin because he was made from the dust. It completely ties human identity to the soil itself. Then we get to verse 18. This is huge. God says it's not good for the Adam to be alone. Now, standard English translations often say God decided to make him a helper, but the original Hebrew phrase is Ezer kenegdo. And Ezer absolutely does not mean some subordinate assistant or an intern. In fact, everywhere else in ancient Hebrew texts, Ezer is frequently used to describe God rescuing people in fierce military battles. And kenegdo means corresponding to or opposite him. So a much, much better understanding of this phrase is an equal counterbalancing partner, a corresponding strength. It's a real game changer for how we read that passage. So when this partner is finally created, we get this joyous poetry in verse 23. The man exclaims that she is bone of his bones and flesh of his flesh. And just like we saw with Adam and Adama, we get another brilliant linguistic tie. He calls himself Ish, man, and calls her Isha, woman. The actual Hebrew root words for man and woman are linguistically woven together, perfectly reflecting their deep, literal connection in the story. But of course, amidst all this intimate creation and beautiful wordplay, a massive narrative tension is introduced. In verse 17, this very close, personal creator also lays down a single, incredibly strict boundary in the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They are totally free to eat from literally any other tree, but eating from this specific one will result in death. It's the one hard limit in this otherwise completely abundant microworld. Okay, let's bring it all together. Section 5, the two creation stories, macro versus micro. When we lay these core differences out side by side, an amazing picture emerges. In chapter 1, the scope is the entire universe, the divine action is bara, speaking from afar, and God is referred to simply as Elohim, which is a majestic, somewhat distant title. But zoom into chapter 2, and the scope drastically narrows down to just humanity and a garden. The action shifts to Yetzar, physically forming and molding. And remarkably, even God's name shifts. The text starts calling God Yahweh Elohim, which combines that majestic title with the highly personal, specific name of God. So what is the big takeaway here? Why does this all matter? Well, reading the original Hebrew completely transforms our understanding of Genesis. It reveals a poetic rhythm that you literally just can't hear in English. It perfectly highlights this beautiful macro to micro duality, showing a God who is big enough to order the entire cosmos, yet intimate enough to get dirt under his fingernails. The language itself, like Adam and Adama, directly connects humanity's very identity to the earth. Ultimately, it takes a standard, flat translation and turns it into an incredibly rich, multidimensional narrative. Which leaves us with this final, kind of wild thought. If digging into just a handful of Hebrew words can completely revolutionize how we read the first 2 chapters of Genesis, what other meanings are hiding just beneath the surface of the words we think we already know so well? It really makes you want to look a lot closer at the ancient texts that have shaped our entire world. Thank you guys so much for exploring this with me today. Keep asking great questions, and I will see you in the next explainer.